Hey guys, it's Claire Metz here for video blog number 1. And for this one, I actually chose to interview my dad. He works at Continental Automotive as the executive director of the commercial vehicles group, and he works with um, his team locally and all across the world with this an international company. And the communication between countries and people constantly traveling and being busy, and they can telecommute from home, and I think that creates a lot of different opportunities for misunderstandings as well as an environment to excel in communication and to learn and thrive in that area. He also had a lot of relationships overseas, as I mentioned before, and communicating between very diverse groups. And he actually went to a leadership training conference at Duke College in North Carolina. And I think personally, leadership is a really big skill for me and something I'm really interested in learning more about. And because he did that leadership training conference and class, he got a certification for it, which I think is awesome. Really good experience to have. I think communication and being an effective communicator is one of the number one requirements of being an effective leader as well. So here is an interview with him, and I will do some summary at the end. Okay. So what is your name, and can you tell me a little bit about what you do at Continental as the Executive Director of the Commercial Vehicles Group?
Absolutely. My name is Scott Metz. I'm the head of the Commercial Vehicles Group for Continental Automotive. And so my responsibilities revolve around all of the commercial activities for the commercial vehicle customers like Caterpillar, John Deere, Cummins, Navistar, any types of negotiations that take place, and then all of the relationship responsibilities with those customers fall on my account managers. We also have a technical requirement that we pass on for future technologies and what we can introduce to the customer, kind of look at analyzing what their needs are, combine the two, and then try to put that into our business portfolio for the products.
To start, I'd like to ask you what communication means to you.
I would say everything. When you look at communication, if you don't have that, things will break down very quickly. You will not be able to accomplish what you're trying to set out to do. That's a problem in any type of business. It's going to reduce your profitability, things like that. So communication is key in everything that we do.
Especially in business. So what form of communication do you use the most with your team?
Multiple. I have global responsibility for all those customers. I think in regular discussions with you on one of the Cummins business, you know that there's joint ventures in China. So I have a team in China, a team in Germany. Really, most of the time it's over the phone, so it's not really face-to-face. Locally here, it's face-to-face, same time through Lotus Notes, instant messaging, texting. So any type of technology that we can use to be able to communicate, we do.
Okay.
But most of it's face-to-face.
But there's no one specific, just kind of whatever works best for you at the time.
I would probably go to face-to-face as my main source of communication. I kind of have an open door policy, so people want to come in, talk to me, they can. They feel completely comfortable doing so, and everything seems to work fine.
Awesome. So then with customers, is it kind of the same thing because you've got customers all over the world?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. So we try to make sure that we're visiting the customers on a regular basis. Those customers tend to enjoy that. It kind of makes them feel a little bit more important. You're looking after the accounts, the programs.
Build a strong relationship with them.
Absolutely. I don't think you can build a strong relationship over the phone. So it's very mixed. Our customers in China, I go over there 6, 7, 8 times a year. That's always relationship building when you go over there. So most of the time it's face-to-face with the customers also.
So what are some of the main difficulties you face when you're communicating with your team?
I'm not sure it's misunderstanding or any types of issues that come up. I think it's a matter of making sure that the message is clear. There's you do not communicate well, that time constraint will always ruin the outcome if you don't communicate properly.
Absolutely. So with that time constraint, is it frequent that you don't have deadlines being met?
No, I would say it's very infrequent. Automotive world is all based on deadlines. If there's any type of deadline that will be pushed back, there has to be immediate escalation of, again, communication. Right?
Yeah.
You have to communicate to the program management team. You communicate to the executive management team if it's necessary. When things get escalated to me, it's usually talking with the senior levels within the companies to resolve any issues that are time constrained again. So really, communication, it all revolves around that. So if you don't have it, then you will have issues.
So what about the customers that you're working with?
I think I touched on it a little bit in the last question. All of our programs that we have are based off of automotive components. The commercial vehicles group is responsible for engine controllers, and then all the wet side components, which are injectors, fuel pumps, things like that. Each of those components has a program team at the customer. So our program teams have to have regular weekly meetings with those program teams at the customer, communicating what is happening with the project. If there's any misses, if there's any quality issues, if there's any testing issues, all the way up to launch. And then once launch occurs, you go through a thing called PPAP, which is basically qualifying that product into a point where, from a process perspective, you can actually put it in a vehicle and drive the vehicle off of a lot. And that all revolves around 2 years, 2.5 years of a program timeline, which is meeting on a weekly basis. So everything, again, comes back to communication.
And especially that the time deadline in that communication, making sure the deadlines are met and communicated properly and there are no misunderstandings, especially
Correct.
when you're dealing with people around the globe.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So working for an international company, again, you deal with a very diverse group of people. So what communication struggles does that pose for you?
I think when you're talking, just an example, for instance, I have a gentleman on my team as an account manager. He's of Taiwanese descent, so he used to be the head of China region for commercial vehicles. He now works for me in North America. And being in China all his life, he has a very strong accent and speaks very quickly. So noticing this, he and I talked during the first part of his annual review, and it was brought up to me by a customer that, hey, it's very, very difficult to understand this person. That was a tough one. It's a very, very delicate subject to address in a review. It's interesting because last week in my mid-year with him, he actually thanked me, and he's communicated the same thing to his wife because she speaks very quickly. And so now what he's doing is teaching her how to communicate better.
Kind of passing that
Absolutely.
along. Cool. That's really cool. So that kind of goes with my next question. Then I was going to ask you what changes you've made to deal with those issues with the diverse cultures that you deal with. So would you say that's kind of the number one thing is, again, communicating that, like making sure they're aware of the differences and that it is hard for different dialects to understand different dialects and languages and things like that?
Yeah, I would probably tend to agree with what you're saying there. The overall, when you look at communicating with a very diverse team, first and foremost, my team is much older than I am. So most of them are in their late 50s, early 60s, heading towards retirement. I think that introduces a communication, sometimes a communication barrier right there. Most people aren't interested in texting that are at that age. They're not technology driven in most cases. Some of the challenges do come up, but if you improvise, adapt, you look at it and say, how can I make my communication better? It's always key in helping other people better their communication. And a rule that I use is listen to understand. Don't listen to react. If you're an active listener, that's one of the biggest parts of communication is being able to listen and understand what your discussion partner is talking about. If you're not willing to listen and understand, you're not communicating properly. So you always have to look at yourself and find out whether or not you're communicating properly also.
So one of the points that you brought up was that with a lot of your team being older than you, and you're a lot younger, with the technology side of things, do you find that becoming a barrier that they just don't know the technology, and do they fight having to learn it, or does that kind of counteract what they're doing in the job and having the job to begin with?
Well, I think that most of them have adapted. They do understand that there's all kinds of different forms of communication. When we're traveling, if there's something that's up, they need to be accessible either by phone. If there's a quick text, most of them are very responsive to me now. I've been in this role for 6 years. There is some instances where you have the younger generation. I had a buyer at one of our customers. Younger generation, you call. I'm sort of halfway between old school and new school, I guess if you want to call it that.
More modern, yeah.
More modern,
okay.
Right? The old school approach is pick up the phone and call them, drive down to the customer and see them. In this case, it was a younger gentleman that was in a purchasing role, and the only way that you could get a hold of him was through texting. And it took probably about 6 months to really understand and realize that the only way that you're going to get a response from him is by texting him. You can call and leave messages, you can send emails. Unless you text them, you're not going to get a response back. And that's from there on out, that's the way I've responded to them or communicated with them.
Yeah.
Was through text.
So that kind of goes back to just making sure that you're adapting to all your different people you're interacting with and different environments and situations and things like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have, so thank you
very
much.
You're very welcome. Thank you much.
So this interview really confirmed a lot of what we've been learning about in class, and that so much of everyday tasks and relationships is based on communication and having those essential skills in order to succeed. Looking back on it, I wish I would have asked a bit more about the leadership and communication side of things, just because that's where my own interest lies. But overall, I think it went really well, and again, really nailed down how important being an effective communicator is in life in general, but especially in business, and being able to communicate with coworkers and people who are supervising you and your peers and your customers as well, and anybody that you may be coming into contact with